And we are live. Yes. Good evening. Happy Tuesday to everybody. I hope everybody's coming off a pretty fantastic weekend and is getting off to a good start this week. There is so much to cover. Here, let me back this mic out of screen. There is just a ton to cover. And I came in with a certain agenda. Of course, we're going to go heavy on Canelo versus Charlo. This is Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo fight week. I want to discuss the undercard, but breaking today, and we're going to talk a little bit about this along with, Canelo versus Charlo and the other stories, but Regis Prograis versus Devin Haney is official for December 9th. This fight's going to take place in San Francisco, so this is a bit of a homecoming for Devin Haney. And let me know if the audio is clear or unclear. A homecoming fight for Devin Haney, and he's going to be challenging Regis Prograis for the WBC 140-pound title. That's a title that Regis Prograis just won in that vacant bout against Jose Zepeda. So Julius Armstrong is in the house. Thank you. And Julia Allen is in the house too. Thank you for the thumbs up on the clear audio. Thank you both for coming in. David Eister, is it? Yes. Awesome. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, Sibo, Sacktown's finest. Yeah, and JT, the bigger figure while we're at it. Yeah, there's a ton to cover today. But yeah, Regis Prograis versus Devin Haney, and I'm wondering, or I was wondering, how they were going to design the flyer, and it looks like they are A-siding. I want to double check this, but it looks like they're A-siding Devin Haney on this, even though it's Regis Prograis' title that's going to be up for grabs. So he's a champion, but because of Devin Haney's comparative stature in the game at such a young age, let's mention that Devin Haney is being listed on the left side of the flyer. Even though Regis Prograis is the champion. And one thing that threw me off on this one, and I actually saw this about a week ago, I just wanted to see if there were already betting odds that were set up on this fight, because, this fight was pretty much finalized and agreed upon, all of those terms that are short of official, a couple of weeks ago. But the odds makers, at least when I checked, had Devin Haney up as like a greater than 3-1 favorite, which is absurd to me. Like, if that's the case, I might just put some money down right now on Regis Prograis. This is Devin Haney's divisional debut at 140, and you mean to tell me that he's a 3-1 favorite against, somebody who's been fighting in the division pretty much for his whole career. I get that Devin Haney was impressive and has, he's undefeated. He's coming off of a controversial, disputed decision win. I thought he won the fight by a round or two, but a decision win against Vasily Lomachenko. But who in their right mind, would have anybody at 140 as a 3-1 favorite over Regis Prograis, let alone in their divisional debut? I just don't get that. So yeah, I'm very tempted to get in on that one early. When I was first thinking about this fight and how it might play out, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe Devin Haney controls most of the pace with the jab, and maybe Regis Prograis' mid-30-year-old legs are going to have difficulty coming in. We saw the difficulty that he had against Danielito Zorrilla and the way that Zorrilla was moving around. So what kind of problems would Haney pose? Well, look, all of these things are possible. I don't know if Devin Haney can reliably take Regis Prograis' left hand. Can he absorb the punch at 140? And yeah, you could, theorize that Devin Haney might be even more comfortable because he doesn't have to drop all that additional weight to make the 135-pound weight limit. So that might be true as well. Here, put it like this. I think that Richardson Hitchens style would give Regis Prograis some issues, especially after seeing how easily he dominated Jose Zepeda. I didn't expect that. But look, if Devin Haney was like a slight favorite, I'm talking like a -120 or -140, something like that, okay, I might be able to get behind that. But like a -300 and making, Regis Prograis like a 3-1 underdog, I don't understand that. And yes, I think I am planning on taking advantage of those odds. Let's see. David Eiser said, I like Haney if he wasn't such a privileged little girl. So check this out. Here's how I feel, because I get that Devin Haney has kind of become a polarized figure in the sport. Yes, he is heavily managed, by his father, and they have that relationship. But Devin Haney, aside from taking the step aside money to fight somebody else instead of Vasily Lomachenko, Devin Haney has walked the walk in terms of fighting all of the guys who might or might not be ducked or avoided by other fighters. So Devin Haney at like 21, 22, keep in mind, a lot of fighters see Frank Martin don't fight elite fighters until they get into their mid or even late 20s, right? We see fighters like, look at Jaime Munguia, for better or worse, or whether it's his fault or not, Demetrius Andre, he's in his mid 30s and really hasn't had a super signature fight. But Devin Haney started jumping into the deep waters in his early 20s. The way I see that is not too dissimilar from Teofimo Lopez. When you paid the cost, you can then act like the boss if you handle your business against those difficult opponents. So, out of those, the four princes, they were calling them at the time, it was actually, well, Gervonta Davis aside, he's a little bit older, but it was Teofimo Lopez who first took the big risk when he was like a 3-1, 4-1 underdog against Vasily Lomachenko. So he took that major risk. I thought he was going to get beat convincingly. I thought that this could have been like a potentially career damaging loss for the 22, 23-year-old Teofimo Lopez. But what did he do? He bet on himself. He got in there against Vasily Lomachenko and he won the fight by a round or two. So he gets to call the shots essentially after making that move. Devin Haney was avoided. Remember, Devin Haney wanted to fight Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney had a belt. Ryan Garcia basically said, no, thanks. I'm going to look in this direction. And he didn't have he fought Luke Campbell eventually, but he was avoiding Devin Haney, even though there was a straight path to a title opportunity. He wasn't interested in it. So Devin Haney, the way I see it, because he fought Jorge Linares, because he fought Jojo Diaz, and this is before Jojo Diaz got beaten up by William Zepeda and got beat by Mercito Hesta. He fought those two guys, and then he went overseas to fight George Kambosos, not once, but twice, took the short end of the stick monetarily. George Kambosos made way more than Devin Haney in those two fights, beat him over the course of 24 rounds. And over the course of those 24 rounds, might have lost like 4 rounds. So he dominated 2 fights overseas. And if you look at the betting odds, like if we now, with the 2020 hindsight vision, look at George Kambosos and okay, look at what Maxie Hughes, the success that he had against Kambosos, even though he wasn't awarded the win. If we look at Kambosos today and say, well, Kambosos ain't nothing, keep in mind, Devin Haney took that fight on the heels of Kambosos beating Teofimo Lopez, and we didn't know what we didn't know about Kambosos. So if you look at the betting odds, Kambosos in some books was actually a slight favorite over Devin Haney. So this wasn't a safe fight, especially now you're going overseas twice. But he did what he had to do, won the 2 fights, and then fought Lomachenko. I can't knock the guy, you know what I mean? So if he wants to demand certain money and offer Shakur Stevenson the short end of the stick, he's paid his dues, and he's only like 24, 25. He's still I have to look at how old he is, but he's still a very young fighter. So, I mean, I want to see that type of energy from all of the young prospects out there wanting to fight all of the kings to then fight the kingmaker, so then you could call the shots. And as far as I see it, Devin Haney has more or less done that. So, I mean, I give the kid a lot of respect. I remember when before he fought Linares and Jojo Diaz, and people were like, why is he fighting these guys? I'm like, yo, like he's 21, 22 years old at the time. Let's give the kid a couple of years to fight these B-level fighters and then see how he does against the upper echelon. Now, no, we haven't seen him against Tank Davis and Shakur Stevenson, but I don't think he's scared to fight them. I think that when things line up, I don't think that he would duck Gervonta Davis. I think he wants that kind of a fight. I mean, if he didn't want that kind of a fight, I don't think he would have gone in there with Vasily Lomachenko, But yeah, I can't knock Devin Haney at this juncture of his career. He's done what I want a lot of other people to do. Julius Armstrong said, I thought Josh Taylor would KO T.O. I'm backing T.O. versus all 140. See, that's another one. I'm like, damn, he's going to fight Josh Taylor. And I'm trying to think. I think I picked Josh Taylor to beat Teofimo. But again, Teofimo went in and wanted to fight like the head honcho basically of the division, still the Ring magazine, the Ring champion. And he beat Josh Taylor pretty convincingly. Now, it might turn out Josh Taylor is near, not a shot fighter, because when you're a shot fighter, you can't absorb punches anymore. Josh Taylor took those punches. He just didn't have the same legs as far as I saw it. Didn't have the same mobility, didn't have the same ability to just jump in and pull the trigger with 2 or 3 punches and then move and throw another 3 or 4 punches, especially in the middle and late rounds. It wasn't the same Josh Taylor. But Teofimo didn't know that going into the fight. I didn't know that going into the fight. Teofimo has shown that he's a super brave guy, and I think that he seems like he's pretty much down to fight anyone. So, yeah, both Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney, I give a lot of props to, especially at these young ages. It's high risk in there, you know what I mean? You like, remember when Erickson Lubin, we're going to get to his upcoming fight against Jesus Ramos, which I'm really looking forward to. But remember when he was like a highly touted prospect? 1 or 2 losses can like destroy your reputation. And of course, it's easy for me to say, well, don't worry about the oh so much. Well, sometimes that's true. Like Teofimo, he's got a 1 loss on his record. And it took for him to win another significant fight for him to build that reputation back. But again, like people don't look at you the same once you've gotten beat, especially if you've gotten stopped. Like look at the way we look at Sebastian Fundora today versus 1 year ago before Brian Mendoza knocked him out. Let's see. David Eiser said, I don't think Teofimo beats everyone at 140. I don't think Teofimo beats Regis Prograis. Like if I had to bet on that one right now, I think I would favor Prograis. But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be surprised if Teo beats anybody. Like Teofimo has now shown us not once, but twice that he's able to have the fight of his life on any given night. Now, can he line up 5 consistent fights where he maintains that same performance level? Time will tell. But at least as we see it right now, he's had 1, maybe 2 off nights. If you consider that Nakatani fight to be an off night, he did have that. Who I got right now, Al Montas is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Right now, if I had to call it, I think I might lean Prograis. I just feel like there are more unknowns with Haney at 140. Here's the thing. He's going to have the reach advantage over Prograis. He will. And Prograis is going to have to get those 34-year-old legs to move in a way where he could jump in and let that left hand go. Devin Haney's not going to engage him in the same way that Jose Zepeda did. So it's on Regis Prograis to figure out how to make this a fight and not a boxing exhibition. If it's a boxing exhibition, Haney can win largely behind the jab. If Prograis could get in there and we saw, Haney's fought a couple lefties, Vasily Lomachenko, and Lomachenko was able to make it a fight in certain moments. If Regis Prograis hits Devin Haney with some of the same left hands or even close to some of the same left hands that Lomachenko hit Haney with, how do I know Haney can absorb that punch without a major issue? I don't know that. So time will tell, but right now I'll slightly lean Prograis. And again, I said this at the top of the live chat. The fact that Devin Haney is like a 3-1 favorite, at least when I checked, that is absurd to me. I am tempted right now to put some money on Regis Prograis, just because they're basically giving you, they're not giving you anything. There's a high chance that you're going to lose your money, but the odds make it very advantageous if you put something down. Yeah, Regis does have heavy feet. And, that isn't a new thing. Like sometimes somebody's feet will get heavier as they enter their early to mid 30s. See Josh Taylor, right? Regis Prograis, even if you look at some of his older fights, like the fight against Josh Taylor, you could tell that he wasn't as fleet of foot as Josh Taylor. even when you see Regis Prograis fighting Carol Relic, remember in the semifinals of that World Boxing Super Series that led to Regis Prograis versus Josh Taylor, when he stopped Carol Relic, it wasn't because he had super active feet. So that's not his thing. So yeah, he's going to have to figure out a way to move because, again, Carol Relic will come at you. Josh Taylor will come at you. Jose Zepeda will come at you. Danielito Zorrilla in Prograis' last fight, not so much. Devin Haney, not as much. So Regis Prograis is going to have to figure that out. So I do see how the styles might favor Devin Haney. But again, there are too many boxes that have yet to be checked. Now, granted, that fight against Linares was like 4 or 5 fights ago for Haney. He's done a lot of fighting since he got wobbled at the end of that round against Linares. So I don't think Haney's got a weak chin. And I know that he could fight. Look at the way he battled back against Lomachenko and ended up winning, in my book, the last round after losing the 10th and 11th round to Loma. That was very impressive. That said a lot about his gusto and a lot about his competitive nature. So he does have that. He does have that proverbial dog in him. And Prograis has the same. But I think that I'm slightly leaning Prograis. But again, just like Teofimo Lopez, nothing would surprise me. Nothing would surprise me with Devin Haney either. And I can't wait to do a deeper dive into that fight and issue out, like an actual preview video on it. Because, yeah, that's this has been an unbelievable year. I want to do a retrospective and stack up the year and look at all the fights that we had. And I want to try to find another fight in recent boxing history that lines up or can compete with this year in terms of the array of quality fights that we've had. Everything from like the super fights to the fan friendly, like the purist types of fights, the super fights meaning Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia, obviously Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. But then we also got Teofimo versus Josh Taylor. I wish we got Virgil Ortiz Jr. against Stanionis. That's the one that got away. And they never scheduled Dimitri Bivol versus, of course, what's the guy's name? I can't, I can't believe the best, Beterbiev, Artur Beterbiev. They never scheduled that one. That might be one of my 5 favorite fights. Like if I could wave a wand and make a fight happen, Bivol versus Beterbiev would be one of those. Thanks, Al Montos. Yeah, you got it. TJ's in the house. Chill Wave Boxing on Twitter. Check out some of his picks. He's got some excellent betting picks. He's pretty on the money. I'd actually want to know who he thinks will win Prograis versus Haney. Let's see. Yeah, Lubin. Julius Armstrong said Lubin's career might be over on Saturday. Jesus Ramos is a substantial favorite over Erickson Lubin. Why don't we start with that one? Before we because we're going to spend a good amount of time on Canelo Charlo. I want to talk a little bit about that signature, the co-main event. Erickson Lubin against Jesus Ramos. Erickson Lubin, this is a 154-pound fight. Erickson Lubin was a highly touted prospect before he got sparked in the first round by Jermell Charlo. That was the fight that had me say, whoa, to Jermell Charlo. I wasn't, I thought that it might have been too much too soon for Erickson Lubin, but I didn't think he was going to go out like that. And it was a beautiful right hand that Charlo placed low, knocked Erickson Lubin out to where his arm stiffened. Devastating knockout. And so Lubin then won his next few fights, including a stoppage win over Jason Rosario. He had some quality wins, but then he got in there with Sebastian Fundora, the towering Inferno, before Fundora got knocked out by Brian Mendoza. And this ended up being a slugfest dogfight, and it just looked like hell if you were Erickson Lubin. And he got disfigured facially in that fight. Fight was stopped, and so he has since beaten like Luis Arias. So he's fought since that stoppage loss. And now he's going to be fighting the undefeated Jesus Ramos, who is coming, he's beaten Brian Mendoza, who's about to fight Tim Tszyu for the title, the WBO title that Tim Tszyu is now going to be officially the champion now that the WBO is going to be stripping Jermell Charlo for fighting Canelo, which is interesting. But Jesus Ramos has a win over Brian Mendoza. He's recently beaten Joey Spencer. He was like a kind of a guy whose profile was growing faster than his in-ring abilities and accomplishments as far as I saw it. So I kind of looked like, I looked at that matchup like, damn, are they walking Joey Spencer into this Ramos fight like he's walking into an execution? That's kind of how, that was the vibe that I got with that Jesus Ramos Joey Spencer fight. And Ramos indeed beat the brakes off of Joey Spencer. But Joey Spencer isn't Erickson Lubin. And if you look back a few fights ago for Jesus Ramos, look at the issues that he had against Luke Santa Maria. Santa Maria, in my opinion, won like much of the first half of the fight. Jesus Ramos was very reluctant. He was too patient. He wasn't really letting his lead hand go. He looked like he was getting a little bit left hand heavy. And so Jesus Ramos is going to be fighting Erickson Lubin, lefty against lefty. And I just look at Lubin as having fought better fighters than Jesus Ramos, whereas I look at this as being Jesus Ramos's toughest opponent. Yes, Brian Mendoza is a good fighter, but he fought Brian Mendoza like 2 years ago. Brian Mendoza's gotten better since that decision lost to Ramos. But Erickson Lubin, look, Sebastian Fundora is a stylistic matchup where if you don't know how to specifically game plan for that 6'6", 154 pounder, you are going to be in there for a very difficult fight. But Lubin, punch for punch, I look at him as being just as snappy a puncher, if not snappier, than Jesus Ramos. Jesus Ramos appears to have a good chin. I think he might have a chin advantage over Erickson Lubin, because even though Erickson Lubin stopped Jason Rosario, he got wobbled. He got hurt in that fight against Rosario. So that is a bit of a concern. Lubin is still a tough fighter. I wonder if he's as durable. He got dropped twice against Sebastian Fundora. But man, Jesus Ramos is super young. It's like, so you mean to tell me that this guy by the age of like 22, and by the way, he had trouble with Santa Maria. It wasn't that long ago. It was on the Tank Davis versus Raleigh Romero undercard. So that's recent. And he has, yes, since beaten Joey Spencer. But look, Erickson Lubin is not a shot fighter as far as I see it. He might be one or two tough fights or a loss or two away from being a shot fighter. But for me, a shot fighter is somebody who can't absorb the punches anymore. Yes, Lubin got dropped by Fundora, but that fight was more stopped because he was just taking a beating. And maybe due to that fight, that fight might contribute to him becoming a shot fighter. I just didn't see evidence of him being a shot fighter in that recent fight against Luis Arias. So, you know, for much of the same reasons that I would bet on Regis Prograis against Devin Haney, I'm actually thinking about betting on Erickson Lubin because he's a substantial favorite or a substantial underdog against Jesus Ramos. Again, Ramos is clearly a good fighter, but again, he's super, super young. And Erickson Lubin, skill for skill, might just be the better fighter. I think he might have the better reflexes. He might even have the better punching power. So I'm not quick to say Jesus Ramos is going to take this fight against Lubin, but Lubin, for the sake of his career, it's kind of a must win because you go from being a highly rated prospect who they kind of give you like, okay, we'll give you a pass for that sudden knockout early against Jermell Charlo. But that beating against Fundora was something. And now if you lose to kind of like the next generation up in Jesus Ramos, now you're almost relegated to gatekeeper status. So I'll say that about this upcoming matchup. But this should be a good one. I kind of think Erickson Lubin is going to win this one via decision. I've seen evidence of Jesus Ramos being too patient if he doesn't have you figured out. And I think it's going to take him a while to figure Lubin out. Plus, check this out. Jesus Ramos throws 20 more punches per round against orthodox fighters than he does southpaws. Erickson Lubin's a southpaw. So I don't think we're going to get a fighter who's as active as Ramos was against Joey Spencer against Erickson Lubin. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of reasons to think that Lubin is actually going to take this one. And I think that that's where I'm leaning. But, you know, I don't even know which previews I'm going to do later on this week. I did the Canelo versus Charlo one. It's on YouTube right now. Feel free to check that out after the chat. But I don't know if I'm doing Lubin versus Ramos, or the way that it's billed is actually Jesus Ramos versus Erickson Lubin. There's also Yordanis Ugas versus Mario Barrios. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But there's also Otto Wallin versus Murat Gassiev, the former 2-belt title holder at cruiserweight. He's been fighting heavyweight for his last 4 or 5 fights against lesser competition. Now he's going to be fighting Otto Wallin. We're going to talk a little bit about that one here as well. And also this weekend is Jai Opetaia, fresh off his, well, not so fresh, it was a year ago, more than a year ago, his upset win against Maris Briedis, one of the biggest upsets of last year. Jai Opetaia beat Maris Briedis, hurt him in the middle rounds, bloodied him up, got the decision win. This is his first fight since, largely because Opetaia in that win suffered a broken jaw. So he's going to be fighting the pretty inexperienced Jordan Thompson, but who's also like a physical anomaly. Jordan Thompson is 6'6". Opetaia had a height advantage against Maris Briedis, who was looking to jump in. Opetaia was able to catch him with like a lead right hand uppercut because Opetaia is a southpaw, and he's not going to have that same physical advantage. He's going to be giving up like 3 inches against the 6'6" Jordan Thompson, but Jordan Thompson doesn't have nearly the accolades, experience, or skills, quite frankly, as Maris Briedis. But yeah, so I don't even know which of these fights I'm going to do previews on later on this week, but I'm going to try to issue out at least another 1 or 2. Let me get to some of what you guys are saying in the chat. Let's see. Julia Allen said, he looked like Skeletor his past couple fights. Haney picks fights how he fights. Limited perceived risk. He thought Loma was low risk, but wasn't. He sees low risk with Prograis and high reward. See, there's no way that I could look at Prograis and his history and say that that's a low risk fight. I mean, it might be a winnable fight, but like, who is low risk in that division? Not Jose Ramirez. That's not low risk. Maybe Ivan Baranchyk. You know, somebody like that. Ivan Baranchyk would be low risk. Or if Devin Alexander or somebody like that was still fighting like at 140, and I mean late career Devin Alexander, who I'm sure is up at 147, up at 147. But I don't look at Prograis as being low risk, but it might be a winnable fight. And if he looked at Loma as low risk, would it be because of his age? Would it be because of what he saw in that fight against Jermaine Ortiz, who didn't look great in his last fight, by the way? He won the fight, didn't look great doing it. I actually think Jermaine Ortiz should probably leave lightweight and move up to 140. But yeah, in your divisional debut, here, if Haney was low risk, why would you make Regis Prograis your first opponent at 140? I mean, to me, as soon as I saw that he was like leaning that way, even when he first started calling Prograis out, I'm like, really? That's the direction you're going to look? Okay, Devin, that's how I saw it. Let's see. David Iser said, I actually think the two best guys at 140 are Subriel Matias and Gary Antoine Russell. So Gary Antoine Russell is a very good fighter. He's got a lot of knockout power. Very different from his brother, Gary Russell Jr., right? Gary Russell Jr. like is a burner, speed. Arguably the fastest puncher in the sport, at least when he was active. I thought he was probably the fastest puncher in the sport. Gary Antoine Russell is looking to knock you out. He's a bit bigger than Gary Russell Jr., and he's coming forward looking to put a hurting on you. Subriel Matias is like the quintessential phone booth fighter, but he does it in a way where he's just breaking you off with like 3 to 5 punch combinations. Slow starter, you can win some early rounds, but by the middle rounds, man, it looks like it is a handful given his punching power and his ability to absorb shots. Subriel Matias is an absolute madman. And if you look at his fight-by-fight schedule, it kind of sucks for him because he's fighting nothing but like these very tough but lesser named fighters. Ergashev, yeah, he's about to fight Ergashev and defend his title against another very tough, unknown but very tough fighter. That's been Subriel Matias's recent history. and he's won the fights, you know, except he lost once, but he avenged that loss, that decision loss, with a stoppage win. So yeah, Subriel Matias is really tough. The issue with him is, for me, he just gets hit too damn much. He got hit even in his last fight against Hitamias Ponce. He got hit a lot. The whole thing about him is that he could hit you as well, and he could take your punch a lot better than you could take his punch. But I mean, how did that work out at the end of the day for Joyce? You know what I mean? It's just a tough way to go when you're almost like relegated to the idea, yes, I'm going to take a lot of incoming fire, but I'm going to dish out even more. It's going to win you a lot of fights to a point. I think that there's a ceiling to that. But yeah, Subriel Matias is like all action. Look at his fights against like Ananyan and guys like that. He's a nightmare. Puerto Rican fighter. Let's see. I want to get to a couple more right now. Sub Swoles is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Yeah. Sub Swoles is basically the de facto producer of the live chat. Shout out. Yeah, this year has been an amazing year for fights, and it's only September. And I know it took me a while to get to that part of the chat. I'm surprised we're still in September by the time how long it took me to get to that message. Yeah, TJ, I do think people are sleeping on Regis, and it's probably because of that Zarria fight, and it's because he's got a decision loss to Josh Taylor. But he's got power, he's got speed, he's durable, he could take a punch. He's a bad boy, man. Regis Prograis is not the one to play with. Marco Cardona is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, it's been a couple weeks since the last stream. Yeah, thank you. Julius Armstrong said, TJ, what's the upsets this weekend? I got Elijah Garcia getting KO'd. TJ said Regis is the heaviest hitter by far that Haney is about to be in with. Exactly. Whose power comes close to Regis Prograis when it, you know, in terms of Devin Haney's opponents? Jorge Linares, would he be the hardest puncher? I mean, Linares, remember the times that he stepped up to try to fight at 140? He got beat by Pablo Cesar Cano. He got stopped early by Pablo Cesar Cano. So yeah, this is going to be apples to oranges compared to anybody that Prograis been in there with. Now, he's been in there with some, I mean, Vasily Lomachenko's a fantastic fighter, but he doesn't have the per punch power of Regis Prograis. I mean, don't forget, like, Prograis was in the 140 division when he was in his 20s. When Lomachenko was like in his 20s, the guy was fighting like 130, 126. You know what I mean? He's a lot smaller naturally than Prograis. Let's see. Julius Armstrong said Ugas is super technical. Barrios has no defense. Yeah, I think I'm going Ugas, but probably via decision. Barrios, if nothing else, is pretty durable, which, you know, there are a lot of fights that age really well. Gervonta Davis's stoppage over Barrios, I think that that's one of those that's going to age really well. Just like Devin Haney's stoppage over Zayor Abdullayev, who has since stopped Jorge Linares. Like, I think sometime last year he stopped Linares. And Devin Haney also, Antonio Moran. That was like Devin Haney's last knockout, I believe. And Antonio Moran is the same guy, or Moran, is the same guy who just gave Jermaine Ortiz a hell of a night a few weekends ago. So yeah, certain wins age well. And I'm just thinking like, damn, Gervonta Davis went up to 140 and stopped Mario Barrios. Let's see, Jay Foreman. Jay Foreman's at work, but just wanted to stop by to drop the like. Yeah, thanks. And yeah, shout out. Yeah, like the video if you haven't. I always like to jump into chats and go right into the chatting. But yeah, if you could just stop by that little screen where you could put the thumbs up and do that, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you. And shout out to Jay Foreman. Al Montas said, Lubin versus Ramos is a good fight. Yeah, we covered that one a little bit, and you probably dropped that before we started getting into it. TJ said Ugas is super inactive. Yeah, he's coming off of that eye injury against Errol Spence. You know, this could be one of those trap fights for Ugas. We'll find out because he's 37 years old. Yes, an old aging fighter. Yeah, this could be the fight where it's like, okay, so his best days are clearly behind him. Very possible. Yeah, that's a good point. Julius Armstrong said, asking whether Ugas is damaged goods. It's possible. Waltrod Padberg said Canelo wins. Yeah, we're about to get into that one in just a second. Canelo versus Charlo, fight week. David Iser said, when you look at the wins of Ramos, besides Joey Spencer, he has beaten some good fighters. Vladimir Hernandez is kind of on a tear. Yeah, and that was a competitive fight. Jesus Ramos versus Vladimir Hernandez. Julius Armstrong said a sleeper good fight this weekend. Opataya versus Jordan Thompson. Yes, it is. David Iser said, and Ramos also stopped the guy who recently just went the distance with Xander Zayas. Yeah, Jesus Ramos is looking very promising. I guess the concerns that I have, he's showing that he's got a pretty good chin. It's the age. It's just like, it's too much. I think it might be asking too much to beat a guy like Lubin right now. David Iser said, donate your money to charity before you bet it on Lubin. You know, Lubin has disappointed a couple of times, and yeah, he is one loss away from being a gatekeeper. So this weekend could potentially do that. I just think that he still very possibly has enough in the tank to beat a very good contender, young contender in Jesus Ramos. And by the way, you know, Lubin is still 27 years old. It seems like he's been around for a while. That just shows you how young he was when he first jumped into the sport professionally. Remember when Mike Tyson was the guy who was his main advocate and manager? Julius Armstrong said, Eister, I believe Zayas is a hype job. Hey, I'll tell you what, Xander Zayas in his very last fight looked better than I'd ever seen him before. Let's see. Dexter Smith said, Keith Thurman versus Tank, who would win? I think Tank. Right. Shout out for coming through. But yeah, I would pick Tank right now over Keith Thurman. It sounds crazy. And Keith Thurman might be able to just outbox him. And Keith Thurman is pretty durable too. We have seen him hurt and dropped a couple times, hurt really bad against Josecito Lopez. Damn, I don't know. But I think Tank is probably has better reflexes and is a bit snappier right now. And Keith Thurman hasn't fought since that fight with Mario Barrios. Very disappointing last like 3, 4, 5 years for Keith Thurman. Let's see. Benjamin Tucker, my cousin Benji, is in the house. I have absolutely no faith that the judges would give a close decision to Lubin. That's possible. That's possible. Especially, I mean, you see the way that they build the fight. They've got Jesus Ramos right now on the A side, so that shows you that they're looking at Jesus Ramos as being a potential future champion. Whereas they're saying, okay, Lubin, it's now or never, which is fair. Brendan Jackson is in the house. Salute. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, Al Montas. Yeah, Subriel Matias might lose to Ergashev. Very good point. I mean, look, Subriel Matias, that last fight against Jeremias Ponce was probably his easiest fight out of his last like few. You look, I forgot that one. There was one like southern Russian, you know, the Muslim region within Russia, whether it was Chechnya, Dagestan, or one of the either Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan. There was a fighter that Matias fought that was like, it was a war, right? And it wasn't the guy who beat him and then he returned the favor and stopped him. But those were wars as well. Matias has been in a lot of very tough fights. I wouldn't be totally surprised if Ergashev beat him. I think with Matias, it's fun to watch, but it's like, watch now, because I see it as being, only a matter of time. Mosh Multiverse, thank you for coming through. Hello. He said he's got, I'm assuming he or she said that they've got Canelo over Charlo, ending up being a draw, or Jermell Charlo winning. Wow. Okay. This will be Jermell Charlo's best career performance. I think he's going to need his best career performance to pull this one off. You know what? Let's, without further ado, let's get right into it. Well, Chinchilla is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Edward Espinoza is in the house as well. Thank you. Juan Mendoza in the house. Thank you for coming through. Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo. Again, I dropped the preview, but let's get right into it, man. Look, I'm assuming Jermell Charlo's hand is healed. I'm assuming Canelo's hand is healed. Here's the thing. We all know Jermell Charlo's jumping up 2 divisions here. I think that Jermell's going to have to fight the fight of his career. if he fights the exact same fight that he fought against Brian Mendoza or Brian Castano in the rematch, which I attended, which was a blast in Carson, California. I love that venue because it's not as big as like the Crypto.com, formerly like the Staples Center or like the Barclays Center in New York. It's a smaller venue. You could get some good tickets for relatively inexpensively. But Jermell Charlo still spent a little bit too much time on the ropes against Castano, even in the rematch. But he was able to do so much with his lead hand up top and down low. What I'm wondering is, will Canelo be able to throw his right hand on top of Jermell Charlo's lead left hand jab? Castano wasn't quick enough to be able to do that. And Canelo, like Castano, is a shorter fighter, right? Castano, to me, has more active feet than Canelo, but Canelo's got far superior reflexes, superior punching power, superior just boxing technical ability, great chin. Canelo's like, when have you seen Canelo like hurt? Yes, he might have gotten buzzed a couple times against Dimitri Bivol up at light heavyweight. But aside from that fight against Miguel Cotto's brother, like Angel Cotto, that might have been the last time we've seen Canelo like actually rocked, like where he looks like his legs are unsteady. And the guy went 24 rounds with Triple G. Do you guys think that we are dealing with nearly prime Canelo, or do you think that he is well past prime? I'm not ready to say that he's well past prime. I think that John Ryder is a very durable fighter. Like I would expect Triple G to stop Ryder, but no, not necessarily, because Triple G, aside from that Canelo fight, never took that step up to 168. John Ryder, very durable. He fought Callum Smith, and look at what Callum Smith has done to the light heavyweights that he's fought so far. By the way, I can't wait till that fight it's rescheduled for January. Beterbiev versus Callum Smith. But look at what Callum Smith does with most of his opponents. John Ryder made that an even fight. Most might have thought that John Ryder deserved the decision win against Callum Smith. I know when I was watching that fight, live, not live there, but live on TV, I thought that John Ryder won that fight. But Canelo Alvarez, he has been showing that he's slowing down in the later rounds. But I don't think that is like a new phenomena with Canelo. I think that we've seen it in different fights. I think we've seen certain styles give him some issues. Like in retrospect, he wasn't going to beat Dimitri Bivol, even though going into the fight, he was like a 4-1 favorite over in some books, a 5-1 favorite over Dimitri Bivol. Remember that? Like I always look at it like what the betting odds were, because expectations change once the fight took place, and then it's like, well, look, what happened. So then you've got a totally different outlook on both guys, like Spence versus Crawford 2 or Crawford versus Spence 2. Whenever that happens, so much changes, right? But Canelo, look, can Jermell Charlo scale his weight up? Now, he said that he doesn't need to put all that weight on. So I think that, I'm guessing he's going to weigh in on the day before the fight. I'm guessing he's going to weigh something like 163, 164. You know how Manny Pacquiao fought bigger guys, but then would come into the fight like 5 pounds under the weight limit, 8 pounds under the weight limit, and then just put a beating on whoever he was fighting? I think Jermell Charlo might weigh like a good 3 to 5 pounds under the 168 pound weight limit. So maybe even a little bit more. The big question mark for me is, how does his weight scale up? Now, if he's compromising any speed, I think he's in trouble. Big trouble. If he can't earn Canelo's respect early, I think he's in trouble. So if this fight looks like it's taking on a visual of Canelo hunting Jermell Charlo and Charlo avoiding Canelo, I don't like Jermell Charlo's chances, especially on the scorecards. So Charlo has to kind of marry all of his different eras, like of his career, his different styles. He's got to bring those all together like he did against Castano in the rematch, but even more so, where he's even more, he's controlling the real estate even more, to where he keeps the fight near the center of the ring for the majority of the fight. And when you do find yourself near the ropes, which Jermell Charlo is dangerous off the ropes too, but you're also more vulnerable, like the times where he got hurt against Brian Castano, if you want to say that he got hurt. In those moments, it was when his back was near the ropes. So if you're getting hit cleanly, even if you're dangerous off the ropes, you probably don't want to be against the ropes against Canelo, right? So does Jermell Charlo have the discipline, the movement, the endurance at 168 to be able to keep the fight near the center of the ring for the vast majority of the time and to stay off the ropes? And again, when you are on the ropes, you better be throwing some punches or holding. You better not be don't do too much standing around looking. I wonder how patient Canelo is going to be. If he gets off to too slow a start, Jermell Charlo has a chance maybe at kind of pulling away or building an early lead. I don't see that as being likely. I think Canelo's going to want to stand his ground and start looking like he's moving forward pretty early. And, Canelo has kind of mastered this style of economy of movement. He's just kind of doing little subtle head movement, changing levels, but not like dipping in the knees too much, just kind of doing like little feints, little subtle things to be able to create a pressure. It's not a pressure that demands a bunch of punches. It's not high volume pressure. It's walk you down and always be near punching range type of pressure. If he does that and he gets Jermell Charlo to if he could spook Jermell Charlo by exploding with the right power punches, like explode to the body with a hard right hand, explode up top, go throw your jab. And one thing about Canelo, he's got a great right hand, but he's not always super comfortable letting it go. He's got to set the table and then get comfortable throwing the right. We'll see how early in this fight he gets comfortable enough to let that right hand go. But if Canelo looks like he could kind of start spooking Jermell Charlo to where Jermell Charlo looks like he has to throw, a good amount of volume and then tie up, that's bad for Jermell Charlo. If he's able to get Jermell Charlo to resort back to his early style, think about the fights against John Jackson, to an extent, Vanes Martirosyan, basically, and his fights against Tony Harrison. Keep in mind, it wasn't only that first fight that Jermell Charlo arguably got outboxed. I thought he got outboxed in both fights. It's just that he saved the day with a knockout against Tony Harrison in the rematch. Through 8 rounds, the unofficial scorecard had Tony Harrison up by a couple rounds. And that's with a knockdown, because Tony Harrison got dropped early in that fight, and then he went on a run where he won like 4 out of the next 5 rounds. So look at that; those fights. By the way, I do think that Tony Harrison's style, not Tony Harrison, but his style, could have given Canelo issues. Not that Canelo wouldn't have beaten Tony Harrison. I would have picked him to beat Harrison, but he would have had some issues fighting Tony Harrison until he didn't, something like that. Or it could have been like Canelo versus Austin Trout, which I thought was a very competitive fight. But we've seen instances of Jermell Charlo being outboxed late in his career. I mean, he got outworked against Brian Castano, you could argue, in that first fight. He had trouble with Tony Harrison, had trouble with John Jackson. I even thought that he was having some issues early in his fight against Jason Rosario, where he knocked Rosario out to the body in like the 5th or 6th round. So if he starts to become a reluctant to let your hands go fighter because he's getting a little bit spooked by Canelo's power, bad news for Jermell Charlo. That won't be a winnable fight. Jermell Charlo has to stand his ground to an extent. He's got to even start backing Canelo up in moments where his jab and him throwing like 2 or 3, like a straight right hand, a left hook. And Jermell Charlo is also pretty good at kind of lowering his head momentarily and kind of winging a wicked looping shot over the top. He's good at throwing those. Look at how flush he catches Castano with some of that. he was also able to catch Castano with some uppercuts, timing him very well, because Castano likes to kind of come in on you and move in. And again, being the shorter fighter coming in low, you're vulnerable to those uppercuts. I wonder if Canelo's head movement is just on a different level than Castano, at least in the first half of fights. Now, in the second half of fights, I feel like Canelo is a little bit more stationary and is lacking some of that head movement that we saw, you know, against Daniel Jacobs, when Canelo was able to like put his hands down and make Daniel Jacobs miss with like 5 or 6 jabs in a row. I was watching that fight like, damn, okay, so much for Daniel Jacobs being able to control this one at range. Will Jermell Charlo be able to control a lot of the time, like 2 out of 3 minutes of some of these rounds at range? Or is this going to take on the tone of, I don't know, Canelo versus Callum Smith, where it just looks like he keeps on walking Charlo down from pillar to post? Will Jermell Charlo be able to take Canelo's power? These are a lot of things that we don't know. So for those reasons, as it stands, I'm picking Canelo right now, but I'm not picking Canelo via stoppage. I think that it could be a situation where Canelo starts to win a lot of the middle rounds and maybe some of the early rounds, and then Canelo starts to fade like he did against Triple G in the trilogy fight, like he did against Dimitri Bivol, like he did against John Ryder. He might start to fade to where Jermell Charlo starts mounting a comeback, but it's just not enough, at least to win the judges' scorecards. And so I could see Canelo winning like a 116 to 112 type of fight. But yeah, can Jermell Charlo take Canelo's power? And can Jermell Charlo earn Canelo's respect with his power? Let me get to what some of you guys are saying. But yeah, there are just a lot of questions. But right now, I'm still leaning Canelo Alvarez via decision. But man, that would be something else if Jermell Charlo wins this fight. That would be like this is a historical matchup as it stands, because you've got undisputed versus undisputed. And, you know, I said this in the preview, in the years leading up to what has resulted in this matchup being made, at any juncture along the way, I would have rather have seen Jermall in there with Canelo in terms of getting a competitive fight. I thought that Jermall was better suited to match up well with Canelo, because it was Jermell who was having those feast or famine moments in the ring where you're either hurting the guy, knocking him out, or you're probably losing the round. There was a lot of that with Jermell Charlo, not so much with Jermall. I looked at Jermall Charlo as being the better round winner between the two Charlo brothers. But as fate would have it, you know, it's going to be Jermell in there. Let's see. Chinchilla, thank you. Love the channel, Woog. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the engagement, you know, in certain comment sections and so forth that we've had over the past several months. TJ said, let's see. NMTK is in the house. Yeah, thank you for coming through. He said, I'm going to place a bet on Canelo via stoppage or decision. Next Gen Combat Sports TV said, Bivol is a slick black fighter. If you mean stylistically that there are a lot of brothers who fight in that similar style, there are, but there are also a lot of, you know, decapitators as well. But yeah, in terms of the slickness, I'm trying to think of who else has that style. Caleb Plant is another one, right? Let's see. Billy Joe Saunders, by the way, is pretty, it's pretty slick as well. But yeah, I get what you're saying. You know, it's been such a disappointing recent run for Dimitri Bivol after that win against Canelo. Like, who would have thought that we might not see him not only, well, okay, he beat Zordo Ramirez later on in that same year, but to potentially not fight at all in 2023, what a debacle. Like, that's pretty unfortunate. It's just that a lot of these fighters, when they have moments like that, they think that their next fight's going to be like $15 million, $10 million. And when they realize that they might get 4 million or maybe 6 million or 5 million, something like that, they're like, wait a second, this isn't what I thought I was getting. Or even less than that, 2, 3 million. But Dimitri Bivol just needs to get back in the ring. You don't want to, get rusty and come back, not the same guy. Let's see. GWK, thank you for coming through. GWK said, an issue with Charlo is he doesn't have Bivol's work rate. Yeah, he doesn't throw. Sometimes he doesn't throw enough punches per round. That's why I was so impressed with his performance on Castaño. To me, that was his most consistent minute over minute activity, and also varying up the punches. And again, when you go to the ropes, whereas in the first fight, he would kind of sit on the ropes to the point where he would start taking a lot of clean punches. In the rematch, yes, he did take some clean punches, but usually when his back would get near the ropes, he would usually get at least even damage in the exchange. He would at least dish out just as much, or more often than not, dish out the faster, more cleanly landing punches when his back was against the ropes. But he would only keep it there for like 3 to 4 seconds, and then he would go high guard, angle out, and then he would be able to pivot and then move towards the center of the ring. He did a very good job at that. And again, he was doing a good job at catching Castaño with a lot of left hooks, a lot of sneaky uppercuts, and of course that straight right is money. But he was just mixing it up and also going to Castaño's body. He made all of the necessary adjustments, obviously, that he was lacking in that first fight. But again, I think he's going to have to be even a little better than that to beat Canelo, especially at 168. And again, I'm going to repeat, we don't know what Jermell Charlo scaling up is going to look like in terms of hand speed, in terms of how much endurance he has in the middle and late rounds. I suspect that he's going to be in excellent shape. And if he is in excellent shape and is in better shape than Canelo, he's got a chance here. I don't think he's going to stop Canelo, but I think he's got a chance at winning on the scorecard if he's in phenomenal shape and can execute a similar style in terms of your minute-by-minute performance that he did against Castaño in the rematch, but even better. He's going to need to do it all, seriously. And he's going to have to, again, get Canelo's respect, hit him hard, and back Canelo up a bit to where what you want to see if you're pulling for Jermell Charlo, or if you are Jermell Charlo or Team Charlo, is you want to see Canelo with those moments where he puts up the high guard and shakes his head no, like you didn't do nothing to me. If you start seeing multiple moments of Canelo doing that, it's like, okay, Canelo might be in trouble. Or if you start seeing Canelo waving Charlo in, saying, no, come on, fight me in the phone booth, that's a good sign for Jermell Charlo. Let's see. Yeah, GWK, Bivol did really eat Canelo's uppercut and arm shots, but never dropped his arms and kept his composure, kept circling around. And yeah, never dropped his arms, and he kept his composure, circling around. Very important. Yeah, Charlo's going to have to do a lot of that. Hopefully he doesn't need to eat too many uppercuts. And hopefully, because Charlo does dip to certain sides, Castaño just wasn't really picking up on it. We know that Canelo could read the room, read the defense better than Brian Castaño can. So if he's noticing certain tendencies, Canelo's got a very good ability at positioning the punch there, like he did against Billy Joe Saunders. So Charlo's going to have to mix up the angles and mix up the defense when he's in punching range. Don't keep on dipping to the same side. Let's see. David Eister, why does the PBC keep having Frank Sanchez fighting bums? Frank Sanchez, for those that don't know, Frank Sanchez is a very skillful heavyweight who actually beat Efe Ajagba. That's Efe Ajagba's one loss. And he has since fought less than stellar competition. I think his best opponent since that was Christian Hammer. But the reason he's not fighting meaningful fights is because I don't think he can get the notable PBC fighters in there with him. I don't think he could get Andy Ruiz in there with him. I don't think Deontay Wilder's very interested in fighting him. You look at the top heavyweights, he might have to settle for like Demirazin. You know, Demarazin's one of the guys that beat Konachki. I would say Kusamano, the last guy who beat Konachki, but Kusamano tested positive for PEDs. But yeah, if I'm Frank Sanchez, I would try to get one of those like Makhmudov. Makhmudov fights on Top Rank, but that level of fighter where it's a good opponent, but you're not going to get a top 10 guy. It doesn't seem like those guys want to fight a slick Cuban style fighter who might just make you look bad and who's going to be tough to hit tough to find in the ring. And by the way, Frank Sanchez dropped a jogba in that fight, so he doesn't have pillows for punches either. So yeah, I think that's why he's having difficulty finding a notable opponent. And MTK said, he's got Canelo KOing Jermell Charlo. Well, hey, if he knocks Jermell Charlo out, that would basically restore his reputation. You know, I still want to see him fight David Benavidez, which, check this out, the WBC, I don't know if you saw this, Mauricio Suleiman and the WBC have announced that David Benavidez is now going to be the mandatory title contender for Canelo's belts, and that Canelo will have to fight him if he wants to maintain that WBC belt by April of next year. So we're in September right now. The way things line up, by the way, I'm sure Mauricio Suleiman would make an exception if they were going to schedule a fight for May, not actual Mexican independence. If you know what that holiday, it's Cinco de Mayo, but September is actually Mexican Independence Day. But yeah, for Cinco de Mayo weekend, Mauricio Suleiman, I'm sure, would make an exception. But it looks like the way things line up, if Canelo is still interested in keeping his WBC belt, assuming he beats Jermell Charlo, it looks like that next defense would have to be against David Benavidez, and it lines up with that Canelo 3-fight contract with the PBC. But yeah, that would definitely restore Canelo's reputation if he's able to knock Jermell Charlo out. And you know, if the past gives us any indication of what to expect this weekend, what happens when guys jump 2 divisions, or guys jump 2 natural divisions, like Mikey Garcia against Errol Spence, Amir Khan fighting Canelo, I believe at 160 middleweight. I think that's where they had that fight. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it was 154 when Amir Khan fought Canelo. Even if it was 154, it's ridiculous. But I think it was at 160. Look at how that turned out for Amir Khan after having early round success. Look at Guillermo Rigondeaux trying to go up, way up, to fight Vasily Lomachenko. And then there's one more that we're missing, Kell Brook going way up to fight Triple G. It just doesn't go well. But, you know, in this case, at least both of these guys were once in the same division. It's just that they have way different experiences in who they've been fighting. And yes, Jermell Charlo has been fighting quality opponents, Jason Rosario, Erickson Lubin, Tony Harrison, Brian Castano. But are these guys on the caliber? Are these guys as difficult? I mean, not only just divisionally, but are they as tough opponents as Callum Smith, you know, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, Daniel Jacobs, Triple G twice, 3 times, but I mean twice when it was near prime Triple G. And Canelo didn't hit the canvas once in those 24 rounds against Triple G. So in terms of who they've been fighting, it's not even a comparison. And props to Jermell Charlo for becoming the undisputed champion, but I mean it's not like they were world beaters at 154. He got a belt off of Jason Rosario, a belt off of Tony Harris. Did he get a belt off of? No, he lost and then recaptured his belt. But all that to say, he was fighting who was in the division. But in terms of pound for pound, elite, A+ talent, he hasn't been in there with those guys necessarily, you know? So this is going to be a huge step up for Jermell Charlo. Assuming we're still dealing with the same or at least similar Canelo Alvarez. Next Gen Combat Sports TV said, yeah, that's what I'm saying. LOL. Shakur and Bivol remind me of each other stylistically. Yeah, there are some similarities in their styles. Obviously, Shakur is a southpaw. But yeah, in terms of their ability to maintain range and for their opponents to just look dumbfounded and discouraged by like the middle rounds, like, man, you could give me 50 rounds with this guy. I ain't gonna touch him. You know? Yeah, they both have that about them. Let's see. Next Gen Combat Sports TV said the rematch with Canelo at 175 would have at least kept his momentum. Yeah, Dimitri Bivol's momentum. I think he should campaign at 168 if he can't get the better be a fight. Yeah, what else is there at 175 right now? He's already beaten Joe Smith Jr. I mean, what you're going to fight Anthony Yarde? Are you really interested in fighting the winner of Joshua Buatsi and Dan Aziz? You know what I mean? If you can make 168, make 168. I mean, and sign with the PBC if you can. But Dimitri Bivol, I have questions whether he can make 168. I know that earlier in his career, when he was fighting like the Sullivan Barreras and, just the different pretty good fighters that he was fighting, Jean Pascal, guys like that, right? When he was at that stage, yes, he was a small, light heavyweight, and he could have probably made 168. But now he's like, 33? He's well into his 30s. He's like at least 6 foot, maybe 6'1", something like that. I don't think he could make 168 without any physical degradation or performance drop-offs. I don't think he could do it at this stage. But I think he would have made an exception so he could get that mega payday against Canelo in the rematch. But I think that would have been the only opponent he would have done that for. NMTK said Canelo body movement, you pointed out, has slowed down on that. It's true. It's right, especially in the middle and late rounds. He just looked like Canelo used to go through fights, and yes, he does kind of redden. I'm saying just his overall body. Like some people, when they go out on jogs, they get red, right? So, I mean, that's nothing new. But now in recent fights, it's almost like he looks disheveled in recent fights, whereas he used to look like he looked when he entered the ring, when he exits the ring. But when you get older, your skin isn't as resilient anymore as well. Like you tend to bruise more easily. And you see this with a lot of fighters. And yes, they start bruising when they get into their 30s because one, they are getting hit more. But even guys who were able to get hit a lot in their 20s, when they're getting hit in their 30s, they look super marked up. Like Ricardo Mayorga, used to get hit in his 20s, but he would come out and his face would just look super smooth, super clean. Look at Emmanuel Navarrete after that fight with Oscar Valdez. When Emmanuel Navarrete is fighting at 34, he's going to look like he's been in a fight facially after the fight. But Canelo, his movement, he just looks like, I said this in the preview, he looks like his back is a little bit sore. Like, you ever, if you're playing basketball and you're able to drop down into a defensive stance, it's one thing if you're in your mid-20s, you're able to slide all day and run up and down the court for 5 to 7 games, just keep on going. When you're in your mid-30s, your lower back would start to tighten up in a way that it wasn't before, especially. So Canelo fights like his back needs to be stretched out and he needs to just, kind of loosen his muscles back up. It's like, he doesn't have the same core reflex. Put it like this. If you just stand up like right now and you start to move your head a little bit, it's going to feel fine for the first 30 seconds. But if you start throwing a few punches, like shadow box or something, and keep trying to move your head for 2 minutes and 30 seconds and then see how you feel after 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes. Canelo is starting to look like a regular guy late in fights. And if Charlo is still fresh and Canelo is reduced to that regular guy, he might be in trouble. You know what I mean? He really might be in trouble. But I don't know if we're making too much of that. I don't know. But it does kind of look like there is some of that going on, specifically in his last 3 fights. But I mean, look at the way he finished against Caleb Plant to become undisputed. He finished that fight really strong. Now, a lot of people theorize that, he has since lost some of the hunger. Because remember when him and Eddie Reynoso, they were all about, what was the phrase? Boxing is life. And they were Canelo just exuded that all I want to do is box. That's the energy that he gave off. Now it looks, it doesn't seem the same right now. And it's crazy how quickly that can happen. Because, I mean, his fight against Caleb Plant was late 2021, less than 2 years ago. Let's see. There was one that I missed. I know I wanted to get to. Yeah, Edward Espinosa. Canelo is proven at the higher weights. And Jermell has been rocked at 154. Next Gen Combat Sports TV said, Charlo might hit as hard as Bivol, but it's a matter of how many clean shots he can land consistently. Yeah, how effective is he going to be with his jab? He's going to be showing movement, and he's got a certain angle where he tries to keep his head sort of off the line. But I don't know. Like, Canelo seems to be able to jab above his height, if it makes any sense. I mean, like, if you look at the fight against Callum Smith, how was he able to jab the 6'3" Callum Smith with those piston jabs so frequently throughout the fight at like 5'8.5"? How was he able to do that? So yeah, like, if the jab battle is competitive, that wouldn't be a great thing for Jermell Charlo, because I think that the punches that you put behind it, I think it's more likely that Canelo gives Charlo the shaky legs, rather than Charlo giving Canelo the shaky legs. Even though, Charlo is a pretty fast puncher and he's very explosive, but again, we just haven't seen it above 154. It's going to be very interesting to see how Jermell Charlo scales up physically. Let's see. NMTK said, or I'm sorry, Cannon Sports is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Said, I'm not too confident in Jermell's chances. His boxing IQ isn't as high. He isn't as durable, and his physicality is questionable. Is he going to be able to take Canelo's punches to the body? Who has really tested Jermell? Well, I guess Castaño did, to a degree. But it's not, Castaño doesn't punch like Canelo. Yeah, physicality is going to be a question. I mean, you look at Canelo's neck. It looks like it was made to absorb punches. Just looks like he's built like a little shark. You know what I mean? Jermell Charlo's boxing IQ, it's high, but I would agree that it's not as high. Like, Jermell's shown a lot of improvement and a lot of skill development over the years. But yeah, Canelo is a very smart fighter. I do think that he got too home run happy against Dimitri Bivol. So, sometimes I wonder, as Canelo has kind of evolved into this, let's throw fewer punches, but maximize the impact and on each punch style. As Canelo's grown into that, I wonder if he's lost some of his minute by minute ability to stay active for a hard 2.5 minutes out of the 3 minutes. Because Canelo would always take like little pockets of like 15 to 20 seconds off. I mean, that goes back early in his career. But he's able to throw enough punches in that part of his career to win most of the rounds, whether he was fighting Josecito Lopez or, Alfredo Angulo, and just all the different fights that he was in around that time. Kermit Cintron, Shane Mosley, all of those fights. But I don't think that he's got the same ability to throw as many punches. And if he throws a lot of punches early in this fight, then I think you could almost expect a drop-off in performance in the middle and late rounds if he's doing too much in the early rounds. That's why it's so important for Jermell Charlo to establish something in those early rounds, whether it's winning with distance and your jab or backing Canelo up. Jermell Charlo is going to have to, in my opinion, win the early rounds and then make Canelo work a lot in the middle rounds. Like, don't let Canelo settle into that, hey, I just scared you with that, huh? I scared you with that, huh? How you like that? And then he finally throws a punch. That lands flush. Looks like it hurts. You know what I mean? You can't make the fight take on that tone without hitting Canelo with way more punches. And I don't mean slightly more, because we saw Triple G wasn't able to win a fight behind a jab in that rematch. So if this fight is adjudicated in the same way, then we could get a situation where it looks like Jermell Charlo might have outboxed Canelo by like a round or two, but Canelo still get the decision on the scorecards. He's got to back Canelo up. You can't, your jab doesn't equal his punch to the side of your gut. You know what I mean? Let's see. NMTK said, you can't bet on fights, right? Like me personally, or are you saying like legally or on certain websites? I've bet on very few fights, but I've bet on a few. I bet on both Triple G versus Canelo's, lost on them both. I bet on Pacquiao versus Matisse. Pacquiao, believe it or not, was only like a 3-1 favorite in that fight. I'm like, yeah, give me that all day over Lucas Matisse. And so I bet on that one, and I'm trying to think of what else I recently bet on. And one, I bet on Canelo to beat Triple G in their trilogy fight, but specifically for Canelo to win via decision, and I won that one. And I bet on a Crawford fight. I don't remember which though. But yeah, very few fights. I usually don't bet. For me, betting on fights hurts the enjoyment of the fight. I like to sit with my family and I like to yell with them, yell at the TV, get up with beer in hand and like scream and react and stuff like that. And I like to just kind of let the fight start playing out and then let a fighter win me over with their performance. Money can kind of hurt that. You know what I mean? Like you got something riding on somebody, chances are you're going to want to see the fight play out like that. So yeah, I don't not bet for any moral reason. I don't bet for enjoyment reasons. I enjoy fights less when I bet. Let's see. I was, by the way, going to bet on Spence Crawford, and I was actually going to bet Crawford via stoppage. I was this close. I actually just forgot to do it. I got caught up doing like running errands before the fights, and I'm like, damn, I forgot to bet. It was one of those. By the way, there's a lot of talk going on right now that Showtime is pulling out of boxing at the end of the year. I hear that they will only keep doing the Showtime pay-per-views. It hasn't been made official yet, but I just wonder what move PBC is gonna make next for their non-pay-per-view fights. Like, are they gonna partner with like a streaming platform? Are they gonna partner with like a Hulu, Paramount Plus, Peacock, something like that? Like what does Al Heyman and company have up their sleeves? By the way, I was watching a music documentary on Clarence Avant. He was a big power broker in the music industry through the 70s and 80s. Just passed away this year actually, but the documentary came out 2 years ago. And Al Heyman was referenced a few times in that documentary as being a major broker and a major just connector for the Michael Jackson Bad tour in the late 80s. Al Heyman, before he got into the boxing game, was a major figure in the music industry, and he was a lot of people's go-to. Like people twice his age were coming to him because they needed help with this, that, or something else. You know what I mean? Al Heyman's been the man for a while. But yeah, I wonder what the next PBC move is going to be if Showtime, in fact, pulls out of the sport, which would be, man, that would just be unfortunate. I mean, they're already doing away with their platform. Like, I'm a Showtime subscriber. I just relinquished the Showtime subscription because at the end of the year, it's being bundled into the Paramount Plus subscription, which it just shows you, it just shows you the changing media in the modern era, but it also shows you overall how little money there is in the sport of boxing, unfortunately. Let's see. Oh, Al Monta said, yeah, you're right. Jermell Charlo did win 2 belts from Jason Rosario because Jason Rosario stopped Julian J. Rock Williams, and Julian J. Rock Williams got those belts from Jarrett Hurd. So it went from Hurd to J. Rock to Jason Rosario to Jermell Charlo. Yeah, good call out, Al Montas. Let's see. GWK said, yeah, it looks like Benavidez Andrade is getting announced soon, but him and Bivol could have been a great fight at 168 or 175. They sparred together too. Yeah, Benavidez has sparred everybody. But I hope they make Benavidez versus Andrade. Oh my gosh, I so hope they make that fight. And yeah, that would be a great fight while Benavidez waits and hopes that he gets a Canelo fight. Fight Demetrius Andrade. I hope that they make that fight. No reason not to. Demetrius Andrade is desperate for a major fight. And he's 35 now or something like that. I have to check. He's either 34 or 35. David Benavidez, fresh off of his Caleb Plant win. Yeah, that would be such a big and important fight. That could be the king-making performance for Demetrius Andrade. That could basically make his whole career. I mean, he's made a lot of money, but from a legacy standpoint, that is a legacy-building fight, one that he sorely needs right now. I've actually had a lot of empathy for Demetrius Andrade in recent years because of how his call outs just all fall flat on their face. They never work. Like nobody that he's calling out, Jamal Charlo, you name it, has been wanting to fight him. He can't even get like a Daniel Jacobs fight, you know? It's like the best guy that he's fought in recent years is who? Liam Williams? It's rough. Let's see. I'm going to get to a few more of your comments and questions before we peace out. I'm going to thank everybody once again for coming through. I have such a blast doing this. And it really, like, on the weeks that I don't do it, I get a little down about it. I'm like, man, there's a void. You know what I mean? I just want to talk boxing with y'all. But let's see. The Next Gen Combat Sports TV said it's probably his mobility and range of motion decreasing with age. Yeah, naturally, right? With Canelo. Ventru is in the house. Thank you for coming through. You know what? I want to get to something that I think that it was you who asked me earlier this week about doing historical fights. I think you would ask me that, and I've been meaning to answer that comment. But I would, especially on slower weeks, I'd want to take just random historical fights anytime. And I'm talking, it could be from the early days. It could be like a 1930s fight, 1940s fight, and kind of do a recap review, give you the context of the state of the division, the sport going into that fight, how the fight played out, and what the fight's legacy and impact was after the fight. I want to do that with certain historical fights from any decade. I would love to do that. Especially, the more uneventful weeks would be the best opportunity to do those, because I do want to just do all of the due diligence going into it too. But yes, that would be, that would not only be really great, but just from a analytics standpoint, just from a channel health standpoint, those fights don't age, right? If it's a historical recap, what ages is when you do previews, because once the fight happened, now there's no reason to watch the preview, So yeah, I definitely want to get that going. NMTK said, what are your thoughts on the new belts, the belts that have themes? I think it's cool. It makes them rare for only one-time belts for a victory. Yeah. So you know how like the UFC rolled out the BMF belt for Jorge Masvidal versus Nate Diaz? You see them, especially the WBC, just kind of make special belts for special fights. I do like that. What I don't like is if they then try to turn that into a legitimate belt and make it winnable, make mandatories, make it its own belt. They have enough belts, but those one-off special event, limited edition, one fight only belts, no problem with that. I like that. I really do like that. It makes things more fun. What I don't like is Emmanuel Navarrete being granted, what was the status that he was just granted? Super champion by the WBO. It's like, I didn't even know WBO did that. I knew WBA did that. I knew WBC did franchise and stuff like that. But WBO just granted Emmanuel Navarrete special champion or super champion status. So I'm wondering, like, what are you going to do with that? Are you trying to fight somebody outside of your division? You're going to go up and like fight Tank Davis at 135? I don't know what the plan behind that is, but we'll see how that goes. That's what I don't like. I don't like there being too many belts. Regional belts, that's fine. You know how they have the Commonwealth belt, European titles, British titles, and a lot of other, some other regions have, other belts as well. Those are fine. I don't like interim belts unless it's absolutely necessary. Like when Errol Spence's car accident rendered him like in a hospital for like several months or something like that, then you could either A, strip the champion eventually, or B, create an interim belt. But just creating interim belts all the time, not necessary. Al Montas, you think that Fox is going to be who PBC partners with if Showtime pulls out of boxing? NMTK said, oh, cool, you could bet on fights. Yeah, if I was like an official, like laminate media member where I'm sitting in that little outside of the ring, that section of chairs where only the media guys sit, then I probably wouldn't bet on fights. But I'm usually transparent. Like if I'm covering a fight that I'm even thinking about betting on, I'll say that, you know what I mean? Next Gen Combat Sports TV said, I think Devin Haney and Regis, yeah, that's going to be an excellent fight. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. Right now, I'm leaning Prograis, but I'm just more surprised that Devin Haney's like a 3-1 or even greater, slightly greater than 3-1 favorite. Now, I'm expecting those odds to narrow as we near the fight date. So if you're thinking about putting money on Regis Prograis, do it now before he becomes like a 2-1 favorite or a 2-1 underdog rather than a 3-1 underdog. I expect, again, that margin to narrow. Let's see. Next Gen Combat Sports TV said, I'm betting on Santos to beat Shakur by KO. Wow. You're going to bet on Edwin Davis? Well, look, the odds are going to make it attractive of a bet. I just think that you will more likely than not lose your money. I think so. Like Edwin De Los Santos is really good. It's a small sample size. Obviously, we saw him stop Jose Valenzuela and we saw him dominate Joseph Adorno, which was arguably even more impressive than stopping Jose Valenzuela. Jose Valenzuela is the guy who just put a beating on Chris Colbert, and then they gave Colbert the decision. Competitive fight, but Colbert, was getting beaten up in that fight. But they're judged round over round, so it wasn't the worst robbery, but it was very questionable. But yeah, Valenzuela got knocked out by De Los Santos. Joseph Adorno got dominated by De Los Santos. I still think that Shakur Stevenson is proving at this point to be a special fighter. Edwin De Los Santos, this is a huge, huge step up. I'm not mad at this fight. It's a very good fight, but when a fighter's coming up like that, before they jump all the way in the deepest of deep ends, I want to see them against like the tier below. Like, what do I mean? William Zepeda versus Edwin De Los Santos. I want to see a fight like that before I see De Los Santos against Shakur Stevenson. Isaac Cruz. I'm talking like the notch below the top 3 or 4 guys in the sport. Let's see. So we're about to wrap up in a second, but I want to thank you guys again, and I do want to get to a couple more. Al Montas, you want to talk about the hot take of the chat? David Morrell beats all guys at 168. He is looking really good, and he just like stopped Falcao or one of the Falcaos in the first or second round early in the fight. David Morrell is looking like absolute money in there, but he hasn't been tested against anybody who's like a near elite fighter. I'd want to see him fight maybe not Anthony Durrell today, but like the Anthony Durrell that was like a year or 2 ago, somebody like that. Now, Anthony Durrell is a former 2-time champ, or at least 2-time belt holder, depending on how you classify champ. But he's technically a 2-time champion, major belt. But yeah, I'd want to see David Morrell beat a ranked 8, like a ranked 8 through 12 guy before thinking that he would beat David Benavidez, basically. Let's see. Kanan Spore said, I thought boxing was making a resurgence in the past couple years. I'm a little surprised that Showtime is ditching boxing. I don't think it's official, but that's what we're hearing, right? But I understand why. Not enough money in the sport. For boxing to make a resurgence, how would boxing make a resurgence? First of all, where is boxing the easiest to find? Or at least here in the States. ESPN, right? Top Rank. They've got the ESPN contract. You don't have to subscribe to Showtime. You don't have to subscribe to DAZN. I subscribe to both. But ESPN, it's there. If you go to the ESPN platform while boxing is on, you'll see that they position the UFC fights before boxing. They position golf before boxing. They position F1, Formula One racing before boxing. College football, you name it. Everything gets love, it seems, over boxing, to where you got to do some scrolling to even find a fight that's live, that's on right now, sometimes on the ESPN platform. So boxing needs to, it's tough because the boxers are independent contractors. So once somebody starts like developing a reputation, they're going to want more, want a lot of money. UFC is able to control their fighters' pay. It's a lot easier to run a league. Boxing's not a league. Boxing is a bunch of independent contractors working on a deal, almost a fight by fight, deal by deal basis, trying to extract as much as you can per fight, right? That's the idea. It's not the MLB, NFL, NBA. It's a bunch of, it's It's independent contractors who are further limited in their opportunity because when you sign with somebody, you're not able to just fight whoever you want from these other platforms. So there's that. But you want to get it to as many eyeballs as possible. So the social media, and by the way, my cousin Benjamin Tucker, he was in this chat earlier. He has a lot of good ideas in how you can actually grow the sport of boxing. We talk about this stuff on the phone, pretty regularly. By the way, I love to chop it up with you, Benji, if you're around later on this evening or something like that. It's been a minute, but boxing has to be available for many people to see. And remember, that was the PBC plan. They were supposed to just democratize the sport. Their plan was to give the people pay-per-view level fights for free. Keith Thurman versus Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman versus Sean Porter. They were giving you very good fights on CBS and then Fox. You know what I mean? So that seemed like it could have been a winning formula. It just didn't seem like there were as many, there wasn't enough activity on the calendar to make that palpable. And I don't think, it had good viewership, but for whatever reason, CBS and then Fox, they started to back off from how they prioritize the sport. So you've got to have more fighters. You got to do a better job at building the reputation and the name recognition of the fighters to the masses. You can't have this thing where you're either Canelo, Anthony Joshua, or that chosen few, or nobody out there knows you. Nobody outside of our little boxing bubble knows you. You can't have that and have a thriving sport. You can't make boxing a premium product, basically. Let's see. NMTK said, I have big passion for MMA boxing. When I bet on a fight, it's a bonus when it's a win. The most exciting part is watching it live and rewatching it. I look at it as a technical art of war. Yeah, if you mean, watching it live and including watching it live when you're at the place. Like, to me, Charlo versus Castaño 2 was a lot different when I saw it when I came home later on that night than what I saw in person. In person, you're barely getting an accurate representation of a fight. Like, it's hard to see nearly as much as what people are seeing on TV when you're live watching the fight. Kanan Sports said it's hard to support fighters by paying them millions at the top level when they cannot fill a small venue. That's another thing. A lot of fighters that don't have mega fan bases want millions of dollars. Like Dimitri Bivol isn't a superstar, but because he beat Canelo Alvarez, wants superstar money. It sounds like you should become a superstar if you beat a superstar, but it doesn't always work like that. Like when Jeff Horn beat Manny Pacquiao, he didn't become a superstar. And we've seen other instances of that. Andy Ruiz wasn't a superstar after beating Anthony Joshua. He was a lot more well-known than he was. But just because you beat Anthony Joshua doesn't mean that you demand Anthony Joshua money going forward, you know? Kanan Sports said, let's see. Oh, Ventru said, I almost put money on Tank's stopping Ryan in the 7th round, but I forgot to. Whoops. Was that the round that he stopped him in? Especially because I grew up Pacquiao, Cotto. With the historical fights. Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be a lot of fun too, because you could literally go anywhere. You could go, you don't have to stick with just the biggest of the biggest fights. You could get those fights that aren't as historic, like Corey Spinks versus Zab Judah 2. It could be anything. You know, you could just look at the timeline of boxing, pick your spot, and just do a deep dive and just, and properly give that its rewatch and its coverage. David Eister said, we haven't talked about Shakur and De Los. Oh, yeah. So we just got into that one a little bit. Ventru said, I just want WBA to get rid of all the regular belts. Yeah, and it looked like they were cleaning that up last year and the year before, but then they stopped. And then I think they issued a couple more. It's like, they were on the right track in the 2021 and then sometime in 2022, and then they stopped. Khalidin Kabata, thank you for coming through. It's going well. Thank you. Hope you're doing well. Let's see. Yeah, David Iser. They did make Navarrete versus Conceição on that. It's on the Shakur versus De Los Santos undercard, right? Navarrete should be Conceição. I think Conceição is going to have some early round success. I'm going to do a deeper dive into that one. I want to do a full preview on that one, but I can see Conceição having some early round success. But man, like it's like you have to be able to hurt Navarrete, or you've got to be like among the best at controlling range. You know what I mean? Anything short of like Shakur Stevenson level controlling range, or prime Austin Trout when he beat Miguel Cotto. You've got to either make it a very boring fight, which I don't know. There's just something about Navarrete's reach and his style. Like he's demanding that there are fireworks and that you mix it up. Like Conceição is a good boxer. I don't know if he's good enough to keep Navarrete off his ass, though. Let's see. Al Monta said EDLS, De Los Santos offered a fight to Cruz, and Cruz ducked. Yeah, Cruz wasn't interested in fighting Shakur Stevenson. Wasn't interested in fighting De Los Santos. That's just unfortunate when you see a fighter who you have a lot of, high regard for, right? I guess I'd want to see Isaac Cruz fight any good fighter. The guy's super explosive, even though he didn't look that great in his last fight, did he? And I don't want... Do y'all want to see Tank Davis versus Isaac Cruz too? I'm like, okay, now we get to see Tank Davis fight a guy that he edged via decision, but now he's not injured going into the fight. Yeah, sure, okay, I guess. I think it's just going to be better for Tank Davis in the rematch. I don't see enough evidence that tells me that Isaac Cruz has a better shot in the rematch. And Isaac Cruz was a late notice opponent for Gervonta Davis to begin with, So Davis was supposed to be fighting Rolly Romero. Now he's fighting Isaac Cruz. He handles that fight, hurts his arm, hurts his hand bad. You rewatch that fight. He wasn't throwing that left hand for several rounds. Now he's got two good hands and a lot of notice to prepare for Isaac Cruz. Yeah, I don't think that would go great for Isaac Cruz. I'd want to see Isaac Cruz fight like a William Zepeda, Edward De Los Santos, or just anybody from that, rank number 6 to number 12, something like that. Yeah, Benji's still in the house. Yeah, I will. Heck yeah. Oh, Benji said I could also authenticate you're calling the Spence Crawford fight all the way down to the round. hey, Benji, thank you. But I'll have to say, man, I don't think anybody thought that Crawford was going to dominate Errol Spence like that. I almost didn't know what I was watching. I mean, I'm just reliving the moment. I haven't rewatched that fight yet. I've only seen it once. I want to rewatch that fight, but I haven't yet. I'm just trying to think in my mind how I felt seeing Spence get put on his butt in the second round. That was so weird. I'm like, oh man. I have PTSD from that fight, so I don't know what Spence is going through, but it sounds like they're gonna run it back. CES 707 is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Tank is going to fight Thurman? Not that I heard. Did y'all hear that? I heard somebody mention that and ask about it, but I don't know if the person asking about it was declaring that fight is being agreed upon or discussed or anything like that. I mean, that would be a curveball. I mean, props to Thurman for getting the payday, but I mean, damn. And yeah, Thurman, I just don't like it when... By the way, I just want to say this before we wrap it up. I miss Virgil Ortiz Jr. in the ring, man. I hope he makes a full recovery. I really hope that they get his health under control. That would just be one of the saddest what ifs in the ring. If this impacts his career long term. I was really disappointed and saddened for him and for the sport, really, when they had to, for a third time, cancel Stanionis versus Virgil Ortiz Jr. And remember, they had to postpone his fight with Michael McKinson and then reschedule that before that. Very concerning. Virgil Ortiz Jr. is probably one of my favorite 10 or so fighters in the sport. And I remember I first really took note of him when he beat the hell out of the guy who should have gotten that decision win. I always forget this guy's name. He should have gotten the decision win against Danny Garcia in Puerto Rico. Mauricio Herrera. Virgil Ortiz Jr. obliterated him and has been nothing short of spectacular since. And man, I wanted to see that fight with him and Stanionis, but it's just been one health setback after another. It's really unfortunate. Khalidin Kabata said Navarrete would benefit in training footwork and stamina. He's too fun to watch. Also, his physique could use some definition. You know, okay, so he went from being skinny at 122 to being a little less skinny at 126. At 130, he's got some flab around his belly area. He just looks soft around the belly area. I first started noticing it a little bit in his last fight at 126 against Eduardo Baez, the one where Navarrete was struggling in those early rounds. But then when he fought Liam Wilson, I'm like, I don't think that this 130 thing is going to work out. Like, by the way, I just thought of a fighter who might give Navarrete issues. How do you think he would do against Oshaki Foster? I mean, he might be able to do Navarrete-like things to Oshaki Foster, but would he? I don't know. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And I didn't like it when he moved up in the first place, because what made him so scary at 122 and 126 was his physical dimensions. The fact that he's got a Terrence Crawford length reach at 122 and 126. It's like you're fighting Paul Williams, you know, except, you know, this guy, he's just coming from all kinds of angles, just a matchup nightmare. Like, rewatch those two fights between Isaac Dogbe and Emmanuel Navarrete. But you're giving some of that up as you start to move up in weight. So at 130, I'm like, damn, I guess the party stops here. But then you see how he operated against Oscar Valdez, and then you're like, okay, so much for that. That's where I'm at with Navarrete. Let's see. Yeah, I want to thank you guys once again for coming in. By the way, Joyce and Zhili Zhang, the knockout. Zhili Zhang is gonna have a tough time finding elite opponents. He's got to wait in line at least behind Filip Ergovic, because Filip Ergovic is the IBF mandatory for Alexander Usyk. So it looks like if they don't make Usyk versus Fury next, that it's got to be Usyk versus Filip Ergovic, who said he's not going to take any more step-aside money. So Zhili Zhang has to at least wait in line behind Ergovic. Who do you then fight? I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of guys I'd like to see him fight. I would like to see him fight Andy Ruiz. I would be very intrigued by him versus Deontay Wilder, but I'm hoping that Wilder either fights Anthony Joshua next or Andy Ruiz next. You know, the guys like Efe Ajagba, I don't think are ready for Zhili Zhang. Even though Ajagba, I thought, looked really good in his last fight against what's the guy's name who kept hitting him in the balls and like just kept on going to the groin area. So there's that with Zhili Zhang. Difficulty in finding meaningful opponents, because Zhili Zhang wants his shot at the title. So is he going to take the same type of risk that Joe Joyce took against him? Joe Joyce didn't have to fight Zhili Zhang. Joe Joyce was fighting Zhili Zhang as a stay busy fight while he waits in line for his title opportunity. Big mistake, it turns out. But is Zhili Zhang going to take like voluntary fights and just to stay busy at 39, almost 40 years old? Or is he going to wait for his title opportunity? Also, Richardson Hitchens, talk about a guy who's going to have trouble finding meaningful opponents. I think after him dominating Zepeda, look, this was one of my worst predictions ever. I picked Zepeda to beat Hitchens via decision. Hitchens won every round of that fight. If you gave one round to Zepeda, it was because you were tired of giving rounds to Hitchens. That's about it, really. I was so impressed by how easily he was able to handle Zepeda. Zepeda's left hand was a non-factor. His timing was a non-factor. His counter-punching ability, non-factor. None of it mattered against Hitchens. So, again, I think Hitchens would be a matchup issue for Regis Prograis because of the height dynamic and the movement dynamic and the jab. It's not just a keep on throwing a jab. It's a hard jab. I don't think anybody's going to want to fight him. I don't think Teofimo's going to want to fight him. I don't think Devin Haney's going to be in a rush to fight him. I don't think I don't think Prograis, Jose Zepeda, or not Jose Zepeda, but Jose Ramirez, I don't see wanting to fight him. I mean, maybe Josh Taylor can get in there and want to fight him to try to bounce back, but do you want to bounce back against a technician like that? Well, it's not Teofimo Lopez. Hitchens doesn't hit that damn hard, so maybe Josh Taylor versus Hitchens could be a reality, but I don't know. I just think that when you've got a guy who's a stylistic issue and isn't a big name, they tend to have trouble finding meaningful opponents. Ask Regis Prograis, ask Demetrius Andrade. Yeah, David Eister. Hitchens will be labeled with the boring tags, certainly. And he's even acknowledged that he's got to do more and take more risks, but he's very risk averse. Yeah, Ventru, you want Otto Wallin to get more recognition and bigger fights. He's about to fight this weekend against Murat Gassiev. Murat Gassiev is a former two-title champion at cruiserweight. He's actually the guy who Alexander Usyk fought in the finals of that World Boxing Super Series. So Usyk had 2 of the belts. Murat Gassiev had 2 of the belts. They were both undefeated. It was the finals of that tournament, and Usyk won, becoming undisputed. So that's who Murat Gassiev is, and he's had about 4 or 5 fights at heavyweight since, but against inferior competition. So now he's about to fight Otto Wallin, who's the best guy Otto Wallin has fought since that only loss to Tyson Fury. I would say Dominic Brazil. That might be Wallin. I mean, I was wishing that Wallin and Dillian Whyte went through, but Dillian Whyte pulled out due to injury and then fought Tyson Fury. Makes you wonder the validity of that injury, right? But I've been wanting to see Otto Wallin fight a meaningful opponent. It's like, yo, how do you go from, coming this close to beating Tyson Fury, given the cut and the severity of the cut, going from this close to being Tyson Fury's only professional loss to not having another important fight for the next 3 or 4 years. But now he's about to fight Murat Gassiev. And I think that the winner of this fight, depending on how it plays out, is going to have a big opportunity next. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. But yeah, thank you guys once again for coming through. David Eister, thank you. Ventru, thank you for coming through. Khalidin Kabata, thank you for coming through. CES 707, thank you. Benjamin Tucker, Benji, thank you. I'm going to hit you up. Al Montas, thank you for coming through. NMTK, thank you. Kanan Sports. Pardeep Singh, I forgot to shout you out. Thank you for coming in. You say there's no, Pardeep Singh said that there's no way a 154 pounder is going to beat King Canelo. Charlo is not active enough. Charlo was active before he was inactive, but I get what you're saying. And he was inactive largely because of the injury. Because remember, he was supposed to fight and scheduled to fight Tim Tszyu. Canelo loses to a volume puncher like Bivol, who could take a punch and move forward. Yeah, Canelo struggles with movers, but Arislandi Lara wasn't a super high volume guy. He was a mover. But yeah, I get what you're saying. You got to throw. You'll be hard pressed to get favorable scoring. If you're the guy who's not throwing a lot of punches and you think that fighting primarily behind the jab is going to do enough to win you scorecards against Canelo. Next Gen Combat Sports TV, thank you again for coming through. GWK, thank you. Yeah, I need to find out where the one spot is that I could look and see everybody who's joined the chat or everybody who's in the chat, so I don't have to scroll up and thank y'all that way. Chinchilla, thank you for coming through. Edward Espinoza, thank you. Juan Mendoza, thank you. Mosh Multiverse, thank you for coming through. Yeah, I can't wait to the next one. TJ, yeah, TJ, Chilltown Boxing on Twitter, thank you for coming through. Dexter Smith, thank you. Julius Armstrong, thank you. Yeah, time flies on these. Sup Swoles, thank you, of course. The admin / producer of the show. Heck yeah. Yeah, he hooked me up with a lot of the tech, just a lot of the upgrades over the past year. And we just chat about content a lot. Julius Armstrong, thank you for coming through. Marco Cardona, thank you. Julia Allen, thank you. Yeah, y'all. Yeah, enjoy the fights this weekend. There are a lot of them. Again, there's also Otto Wallin versus Murad Gassiev. I'm not sure if that one's being streamed. There's also Jai Opataya versus Jordan Thompson. That one's earlier on in the day. I believe it's on DAZN, but yeah, I think it's on DAZN. Yeah, those are taking place earlier in the day, and of course we've got Canelo versus Charlo with a fantastic undercard taking place on Showtime pay-per-view that night. So yeah, enjoy the fights and keep your eye out. I'm probably gonna do one or more previews, either a preview on Jesus Ramos versus Erickson Lubin, Ugas versus Barrios, or one of those two other fights that I mentioned. But yeah, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in. Peace, y'all.